So here we go again, number 65, the Darkness to Light Godcast. Welcome back if you're joining me again. My name is Jim McFadyen and I'm in here in the Vortex Centre for Wellbeing up in Lanark in Scotland. Today, 7th of October 2025. I kind of thought that last couple of weeks I'd probably be better kind of date stamping them, just for anybody in the future that tunes into them and wonders, when I recorded them. So that's where we're at, autumn time in Scotland. Heading into winter, and this one, number 65, is called What Is This? What is this? This the wee kind of brackets. What is this? What is this I'm doing? What's the Vortex all about? What is this work? Who am I? What's my story? What am I trying to do? What's the intention with it? What's the reasons, what's the why, what's it all about? And it came on the back of something last night. I had a really kind of long day yesterday. It was like a 17-hour day yesterday, which was fantastic. I'm not saying I'm happiest when I'm working, but I love this work. I love the ability to get people run about it and help people in many, many different ways. And after being on the go I woke up 1 o'clock yesterday morning. The session was starting early doors, started at 7, so I was in here from probably just before 5, and didn't finish till about 11 o'clock last night. So it was a long day, and during the evening session we have within the community there's a weekly group called Boys Club, which came off the back of something we used to do when we were wee. There was in the local church we were in, where I grew up, there was a boys club and a girls club, and every kind of Saturday morning, and then there would be like different camps, and it was really just kind of different sports and different activities, really just to kind of entertain the wains, keep us busy, whether it was with football or you can imagine all the different things that we did. So boys club and girls club. My mum was very part of girls club when we kind of grew up, and she loved it very, very much. So when I started the Vortex and started doing this work in the community, kind of stabilised, and we kind of knew who was going to be run about it full. More long term, and then the boys club and girls club was something that they came back, and it was a wee kind of nod in my hat to I suppose the enjoyment that I got when I was young. I used to love it. They had special awards and things, and you would get different points every week relating to how you performed and your conduct and different results and different competitions and things. And at the end of the year you get different certificates and medals and all that kind of stuff, and it fed into the football team within the church as well. St Athanasius it was. Down in Carluke, so there's a wee bit of a tip of the hat to that. So late last night, one of the lads in boys club, who's a brickie, and he was basically, the conversation was that somebody at work had been asking him, what is that? What is the Vortex? And that's something I hear all the time. I've mentioned on here before, my wife, God bless her, the amount of times over the years where somebody's kind of pulled her to the side, or a quiet word in her ear and asked her, like, what actually does Jim do? What is this all about? And it's very, very difficult to explain it, and there's no real there's not a short answer to it. It's vast, this work, and what's involved in it, and the different tools and the techniques and the benefits and who it helps and all that kind of stuff. So it's a difficult question to answer, and I'm going to attempt to do it within this recording. What is this work? What's my story? What's the Vortex? What's it all about? What we do, and all that kind of stuff. So that anybody that's basically tuning in, everything that you need to know about the Vortex and what I'm doing here will be contained within this video. So that's the intention with it. So what is this work? What's it all about? And what are we doing? I think you need to understand my story first, to see where I came from and understand why I'm doing this and how it came about. This isn't something, it wasn't a career that I would have chosen. I would now, I know what it is, but when I grew up, it's something that didn't exist, and it's something for a lot of people, maybe different now because of the state of the world, but it's still surprising for me to be doing this. Even yesterday, one of the sessions, the session during the day, and what we were doing yesterday, and to be thinking what I'm actually doing and how it's helping people, and it's still fascinating to me because there's definitely two sides to me. There's two bits to me. The first part was from being born up until the age of 24, 25, and this is where I suppose for me I've seen two sides of the fence. So I understand what the world is like, understand, in terms of the reality of the world, and growing up just a normal human being in a normal, family home, and the community, and the challenges that you face growing up, and who you think you are, and what your dreams are, and who you're trying to become, and all that kind of stuff. And then at the age of 24, I had a life-changing experience, and really since then, I've been on the other side of the fence. And that's really what this is about. That's really what this work is about. At the same time, I understand both sides of it, which I think is really important. Everything that I teach, everything that I share, it comes from my experience. It comes from the things that I've been through in my lifetime. I think that's the only way you can teach and help people, is by speaking and teaching from experience. It still amazes me the amount of people that are teaching somebody else's stuff. They're teaching, whether it's Tony Robbins or whatever it is they're teaching, even the life coaching system and all that kind of stuff. But there's a kind of a general outlay of how things go together, and you learn how to be a coach. That's, again, I don't know, great for some people, but this for me is very, very different in terms of how I do it. And that's why I think as well, if I was just a life coach, then people would understand what it is that I do. But I'm not a life coach. I never have been a life coach. I always felt that life coaching and that type of therapy, again, based on my own experience, it's kind of almost like, for me at one point, it was week to week. And you would go in and you would basically dump all your, spew your problems onto the table as to where you were and how bad it was, and then whoever you were working with would help you and give you their answers as to how you fix your life. And that was great. It was good for a short period of time. But what you find is, after whether it's a couple of hours or a couple of days, then you would find yourself back in the same position again, and needing somebody else to basically do it for you. So that's where this work and what I teach and what I do is very, very different from most people. My story is simple. It's darkness to light. That's why the darkness to light Godcast is what it's called. The darkness for me would be the darkness of ignorance, the darkness of being lower levels of human consciousness, which is where I started. That's where everybody starts when they come in, unless I understand that some people can come in as evolved beings. And but for me, the way that I came in was just a normal human being into a normal family, doing the things that you're meant to do, growing up in the west of Scotland, playing football, going to school, not really understanding or knowing why you went to school, hating every minute of it, more or less, unless it was playtime, it was time to play football. And then, which was the only thing I was really, I believe, supposed to do in this life was play football. It still amazes me that I'm talking about the things that I'm now talking about. When I think of, the love and the joy that I used to, love that I had for football, but the joy that I used to get out of it, my real passion for it, from the ages, where I could walk, and thanks to my dad, the time that he obviously spent with me, and, my nature in terms of, whatever I got from football, up until, from being, I could walk up until the age of 18, 19, that's the only thing that I believed I was meant to be doing in this lifetime. I always thought I was going to be, really successful, really famous. I'd have all this stuff, the trappings of success, money and fame and all that kind of good stuff, maybe. Depends on how you look at it, but that was my dream, and that was my the way my life I thought it was going to go. And the thought of going to school for an education, even when I was going through high school, and at the time there was there'd be trials for whether it was for the Scottish national team or different selects, and they would bring you in and they would kind of try to give you a bit of kind of life advice, or just to say that this maybe not work out for you. You might not make it as a footballer. There's always something to fall back on. So get your education, get a trade, get whatever it is. And that was never even an option for me. I only really had a plan A, was to become a footballer, and that was taken away from me in different stages. And the impact of not being able to do that had a massive negative effect on my life for a very long time. I was damaged with vaccines when I was probably 13, 14. I believe it was first year at high school. It might have been into second year. I don't know the exact dates, but there was a shot called the BCG, and I've still got the mark in my arm. It's like the mark of the beast every time that I see it. And what it did to me was basically made me really not well for a short period of time. Put me in bed for a long period of time. Really sick. Chest infections. I had pneumonia at the time. Was in bed for, I remember it felt like months. It was weeks and weeks. I was really too sick to go back to school and too sick to get up out of my bed. At one point I was too ill to be hospitalised, and really kind of wasn't in the best place. At the time, I remember when I came out of bed, I'd grown about, my dad said I grew about 6 inches, and then went back to school after a period of time. But from 13, 14 years old, I was never the same ever again. I didn't know that at the time. Get back into playing football and get back to, try and get back to the normal way of living and being. But I was never the same again, really, from 13 years old. I never really got back. Even to this day, I believe that whatever I was in, that injection affected me negatively in so many different ways. But at the time, the way that it was manifesting was just general illness, so like viruses, coughs, chest infections. Every year, at least twice a year, I would say, my mum would take us to the doctors, and it would be antibiotics and a week in bed with the flu, coughing up, really bad chest infections mixed in with the flu, to the point where you can't get out of bed, soaking with sweat. And just horrible, the phlegm and stuff you would cough up in your lungs. Apologies, but that's kind of where it was, and that was kind of at least twice a year for me. At Christmas time, every single year, it felt like, which was really interesting. There was a football tournament, a five-a-side tournament every year at Christmas time, and I missed it except 1 year for probably 5 or 6 years after that. Even I was young as well before that, so maybe I was compromised. Maybe I was compromised before the vaccine. My dad's side, my grandmother had She always had breathing problems. She had one lung and always kind of suffered. So maybe, who knows, genetics and what I know about genetics, maybe that's not the case. But for whatever reason, the vaccine affected me very negatively. And it was still really good at football. I just couldn't run anymore, so I had no stamina. Before the injection, I was just never-ending life, in terms of vitality and being excited and just on the go all the time. All I wanted to do was play football, and that was every single day, like 7 days a week. Before school, in the house, kicking the ball up and down the house, and then after school, outside, learning different tricks and doing different things. And nobody ever had to tell me to do it. It was something that I just absolutely loved. It was probably a form of addiction if I look back on it now, but I absolutely loved it, and I get so much from it. And by the time I got to kind of 14, 15, whereas when you're kind of starting to, the senior clubs are starting to make their way around about you and starting to, show an interest whether you think you're good enough to go and sign, and then the dream is to become professional. That was certainly, it wasn't a dream for me. It was like it was the only thing that was going to work for me. So it was really this kind of single focused passion just to do that and nothing else. And that's wee Murphy jumping off the bed. Hiya, Dan. She goes. So by the time I got to 14, 15, there was I could have went almost anywhere at the time. There was loads of clubs interested in me. My team growing up, because I was brought up a Catholic in Central Scotland, was Celtic. If I'd been brought up a Protestant, it'd been Rangers, but I grew up in a household that was Roman Catholic. So Celtic was my team, and I had trials with them, and they wanted to make it to go back. But at the time, there was like literally dozens and dozens of boys trying to get into the age group that I was at, and so it was decided I would keep away from that. And the local team, to me, Motherwell at the time, were trying to sign me. Didn't fancy that for many, many reasons. And then by the time I was like 15, Manchester United, who at the time, that was right at the start of their ascendancy, so that was when they were, really starting to, I think they'd already won probably the league by that point. This would be 1985, 86. I can't mind off the top of my head, but they were on the ascendancy. Alex Ferguson was a manager. This before their golden years, with Beckham and all the good stuff that came with that. But I remember going down to Manchester at 15 and having I think it was a 5-day trial, and did fantastic. Scored loads of goals, that was my forte. I could score goals for fun, but at the same time I was no well, and I remember looking back now. I remember at the time like being under pressure, which would be now you would call that like anxiety. Or stress, and not really knowing what it was, because that wasn't really a thing back then. Nobody really had anxiety or suffered with stress. Didn't hear about stress until much later on in life. So I went to Man United, and they were keen to get me back down. And at that point, I remember it was like the national trials. There could have been 100 boys there. I can't remember. It was based in Old Trafford. We were staying at a school. We were training at the Old Cliff training ground at Man United. I've got a photograph somewhere. Me and Brian McClare, who was one of my heroes for Celtic. And I've got a kind of feeling that possibly, I need to kind of verify this, and hopefully I do verify this in this time, but the football manager, Brendan Rodgers, I believe it was him that took the photograph. There was an Irish laddie there who I found out just a couple of years ago was in trial at Manchester United. They rejected him, and I remember after that final night, the final kind of meeting with Alex Ferguson, where they took me in. I was first to go in out of probably 100 boys, and they basically, great, love to get you back down, see if you can settle in, see if you fancy coming down here. For me, I was signing for Manchester United, that was it. I remember phoning my dad when I came out and being just crying like, it's happening, but we're going to Man United, that was it, that was my team, Celtic and United. So Man United were obviously a lot bigger than Celtic, and came out of that, and I'm pretty sure the photograph that I've got, it just feels like it, but the lad who took the photograph, his name was Brendan, I know that much, and then it was an old, a proper photograph that he sent from Northern Ireland, and I can remember his face, and I swear to God, he's like a 14 or a 15-year-old Brendan Rodgers, the current Celtic manager. So if I ever get the opportunity to meet him, I don't know how that would ever happen. I've not watched football forever, and really don't like football, especially football up here. The whole Celtic Rangers thing, all that kind of stuff. But it'd be nice to know if he did take that photograph. That would give me a wee bit of closure. So that was interesting. But met Brian McClair, and at the time, Brian Robson would have been there, and I remember Viv Anderson, the big right back. I remember him getting into his Porsche, and us 15-year-olds at the training ground, the first team's getting changed, a couple of dressing rooms down, and just doing that full time, for those 4 or 5 days. Scored loads of goals. I've still got a wee diary somewhere at 15. I was always dead serious about it, it was like this real kind of determined mission to become a footballer. So I took the diary every single day, and looking back on it, the goals that I scored and the games that I played in. And then come back from there and went down to Chelsea the next week. This is before Chelsea were anywhere near where they are just now. They were probably almost bankrupt at the time. A man called Ken Bates used to own them, who I met a couple of times. I was down at Chelsea loads of times as a kind of 15 into 16 years old, and they were very keen to sign me. I went down with another player called Craig Burley. Craig Burley signed for them and ended up being, doing really well for them, and played for Scotland and all that kind of good stuff. So when I went down, I kind of shared digs with Craig, and had trials with Chelsea probably half a dozen times, and again they were keen to sign me, but I got injured in one of the games. Actually, the time that I went down to Chelsea after Manchester, I got injured, and groin strain that fed into my back, and it wasn't a bad injury at the time, we didn't think. And then that basically for the next 18 months I never played. I missed my apprenticeship. I didn't get back down to Man United. I wasn't training, so I wasn't moving at that time as well. Obviously the hormone surge in my body was probably changing. It was changing, absolutely. And by the time I came back, probably 18 months later, I was a lot bigger. I was definitely chunky. I remember meeting one of the Chelsea scouts up at a tournament in Scotland, and he grabbed my cheek and he said, "You've been on the hamburgers," kind of thing, and it was like, I didn't even realise, but it'd been a long time since I'd played. So I signed with Motherwell after not kicking a ball for a couple of years, and had a couple of years with them, which was a nightmare. Just terrible time in my life. In terms of how they treated me. They actually tried to sign me before I went to Manchester United. They gave me an offer to sign with them, and I laughed. And Tommy McLean was the boss at the time. Wee Tommy, there was Big Tam Forsyth and wee Tommy McLean, who were both, to me, just horrible human beings. They weren't nice. Weren't nice people. And certainly the way that I felt that I probably need coached. That back then was like, they would batter you. They would almost physically batter you, but they would mentally batter you. They would bully you, and they would belittle you, and so many times, I would get home in tears. And I remember we played Celtic at the under 17s cup final at Hampden. I think we beat them 4-1, and I was in the centre midfield and scored one of the goals and made one of the goals. Did I score? I definitely made one of the goals, but they're really good. I used to play between centre forward and centre midfield, so I think I was centre midfield that game. And at the end of the game, we'd won the Scottish Cup at Hampden, beat Celtic, all the families in the stand. First time I'd ever played at Hampden. And I remember after the game, like wee Tommy McLean got me in the toilets and just, in fact, in front of everybody else, he basically gave it to me at the end of the game, just horrible, which was his way of probably motivating me. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it was just nasty and that's how he did it. But then down to the toilets in Hampden, I played there much later on with Queen's Park, and down the steps into the old toilets, and he got me in the toilets and just went through me again. And I remember walking out, we'd won the Scottish Cup, my dad and my mum, when I walked out, and they were just so happy to see you, and the players exit at Hampden, and get at the moat, and I was in tears, my dad was going to fucking kill him. He was going to go and get him and kill him, and that happened on more than one occasion. There was another cup final we played at Fir Park, and again I think I scored 3 or 4 that game. And it was the same at the end of it, just anything they could like, to bring you back to earth, but really have a real proper go at you. And I think it linked back to that time when I basically laughed at him when he tried to sign me, and I said to him, like fucking no chance. We're aiming much higher than where Motherwell was at that time. No disrespect to any Motherwell fans, but my goals were certainly bigger than that. And I was close to it. It just didn't happen. Played with Motherwell for a couple of years, was never healthy, was never fit. Every single time I would get back to somewhere near some kind of state that I was before, my body would break down, the groin would go, my back would go, I was getting viruses, I could hardly breathe, I was really, one of the things that injection did, I believe they really compromised, my ability to breathe properly and how it affected my lungs, my entire respiratory system. And even to this day, I still suffer, with those challenges, even like blocked noses and stuff. So even the way that you breathe, the way you're supposed to breathe, I've always struggled with that for whatever reason. So spent a couple of years with Motherwell, and then chucked it after playing second division. Ended up getting into the family business, which was my plan B by this point. Was serving my time as a joiner, working with my dad. Just a guy, going to work, making money, chasing money, going out at the weekend by this point, a wee bit, but still not really drinking, still had half an eye on wanting to play football, but not quite sure how that was going to go. And then ended up deciding I was going to go in the lower division, so I was playing every week. And then the idea would be to kind of work part-time on the building sites, and then eventually hopefully you would then make your way back to Celtic or Manchester United, or who knows, even beyond that. And after a couple of years, I just get sick of it, just get really, really tired of it. I was playing with Queen's Park in Glasgow. The manager was Eddie Hunter, who was brilliant. We did a tour of North American, it wasn't a North American, it was a tour of Cap, went to LA. We played in the Pasadena Rose Bowl, which at the time I think it was 120,000 all-seater. There was probably about 15 people there, but what a size of a stadium. And I remember coming back from that and just thinking, this isn't working. And then some point during that season, I was 19 by this point, sometime during that season I decided to chuck it, gave it up. We were actually playing Rangers in a Scottish Cup game at Ibrox, and I wasn't selected, even on the bench, and I thought, I'm not doing this anymore, and I basically chucked it there and then. I basically gave it up and gave up my dreams and gave up the only thing that ever kind of called me in terms of was a calling for me to do, but it was a real passion, and I get so much out of it. I used to love playing football, absolutely loved it. It's never been replaced instantly. There's nothing that I've ever done that gave me what I got from football, which is kind of sad, I suppose. And I have looked, there's loads of things that I've done over the years, but there's nothing that ever really replaced that. So gave up my dreams, started working, started making a few quid. By the end of my first probably year and a half on the building site, I was making good money. I was then making almost like tradesman's money. It was my dad's business, so we were fitting windies and mostly fitting windows. He was a window manufacturer, but at the same time I'd be learning how to day kit houses and just general joinery work in the joiner shop at the weekends. Anything to make money, painting wood that was going to go into the primer on the wood every Saturday or Sunday to make a few quid, all that kind of stuff, just kind of chasing money. Bought a wee car, started letting my hair down a wee bit for the first time. When I chucked it, I went from being like a literal saint, because every single thing, there was no drink, there was no partying, there was no late nights. Used to go on holiday with my pals, and I'd be up running first thing in the morning and going to church, going to mass, and they'd be out, smoking dope and whatever they were doing, and chasing women, and I'd be in bed early. And I was like that from a really young age. Even I remember 12-year-old going away on a kind of football tour to Holland. And the kids then, they were pushed, absolutely pushed, 12, 13, 14-year-old. Oh, the west of Scotland one. And I remember going out to Holland and they were absolutely wrecked. Some of them steaming. Remember 2 of the boys went missing in Amsterdam on the way back on the coach, and you're thinking, you get the fucking jail now. But at the time, that's what it was. I was always dead serious. It was always, and I was known as being serious. A lot of the lads would kind of, the people I'd play with would be having a go at me and making fun of me, I suppose. And I was always very kind of self-assured in terms of what I wanted to do. So when I stopped that, you talk about trying to fill a hole in your life. It was all I really did, and every waking moment almost was geared towards that. So that wasn't there. Windies and money and work wasn't enough for me, and I decided to go down a different route, and I started get out, I started partying, but this time it was 1989, 1990, and for the next 4 years I decided to go on a fairly destructive path. Still working all week, Monday to Saturday sometimes, always Monday to Friday, early morning to late afternoon, chasing money, racing against the clock, try to make as much money as I can, and at the weekend, I started going out, and then before you knew it, I was involved in recreational drugs, which lasted for about 4 years, probably from 1989, 1990 to, that was into 1996, so it was probably 5 years, every weekend, more or less. Friday night, Saturday night, and then Sunday, the doom would come in, and then working the Monday. Still working hard, still chasing, the dreams in terms of chasing money and trying to become a success. And that was going great, but at the same time, the windy business and all that kind of stuff just wasn't for me. And one of my good friends was a DJ at the time. He was the first DJ in Scotland, actually. Big Lars, if you ever catch this, big man, I hope you're well. I believe he's in Bali just now. And he was, after being the first ever techno DJ in Scotland, he decided he was going to get back into it. And at the same time, I was getting really interested, obviously, in the clubbing scene and making my own music. And so I ended up building a recording studio. I had a few quid at the time. I was working hard, making loads of kind of cash, and built a recording studio, and was starting to think about producing my own records. And at the same time, I was DJing as well. And the plan was to become a DJ. And I didn't know it recently, like this year, in fact, that all footballers, when they don't make it, they want to become a DJ. And I never knew that, which is hilarious. But that was my plan, to become a DJ. And then 1996, everything changed. Went to Ibiza on an old friend's stag do, invited myself. I wasn't invited, which should have told me something, where I was at that time, because the wheels were definitely starting to come off. My lifestyle and the way I was living was definitely, obviously, was starting to feed into my life. Even the fact he didn't want me to be there was somebody I'd grew up with and was meant to be one of my best mates. But wasn't invited, so I invited myself, and I took a box of white label records, kind of DJ issue only. My big mucker Lars, he worked in a record shop, so he was the chief buyer. So any dance music, especially, he was DJing as well and doing well at the time. He was starting to make a name for himself and looking to kind of do that full time. And me and him went over to Spain for a bit, went over for, I think it was 3 or 4 days. He DJ'd, I supported him, spent a few days, and I thought, this is the life, fucking at that stage and that age, great, let's go, let's party, let's go and make some music and become famous in that way. And that was a real kind of passion me for a short period of time. Went to Ibiza with this bag of records with the intention to get a gig somewhere. How naive and how ignorant was I as to how that whole thing worked, and probably lets you see where I was at the time. And then, first night I was there, I had an ecstasy tablet and had a mental breakdown the very first night. Ended up really no well. I remember really painful, sore head, like splitting head, disorientated, and then I remember, leaving the club. I'd only been in it for probably an hour. I remember the pain that was going through my head because of the noise that was coming off the speakers, and then ended up, back in my hotel room, woke up the next morning. And then the next 4 or 5 days was just like a plane crash. No more drugs. I never did any more drugs the entire time I was there. That was the last drugs I actually took, was 1996. But I was really no well, and that's the last place you want to be. Anybody who's been to Ibiza, especially then, just some of the things that I saw, the way that the police and the Guardia Civil were treating people, was just, insanity. Some of the things that I saw in terms of macing people and, hitting them with their sticks when they were walking home for a night out. I never slept, I don't think, for the next 4 or 5 days. I had no water, I had no food. I was walking about barefoot with a record bag, which is fucking tragic when you think about it, but that's where this started for me. And then eventually ended up in a really pretty shit situation where I get arrested by the Guardia Civil. Long story short, a whole load of things kicked off. One of the hotels, I was actually DJing in this hotel without even asking anybody. There was a set of decks and I just started putting the music on, and they called the police, and then the police came and tried to arrest me, and I couldn't pay for, there was a drink spill at the bar that I couldn't pay for because I had no money. My wallet had been stolen, I'd lost all my bank accounts, had been emptied, and the police were called, and 2 police officers, and I'd watched, I believe it was these same 2 police officers, I'd watched them batter this young couple, probably about 5-6 o'clock in the morning, just a couple of days previous. And I remember watching it. They were walking home and the police approached them and they maced them, and I remember just the lassie screaming and the police were smashing them with these big kind of these truncheons, where they were, I think they're like metal battens, covered in leather. Horrific, just horrifying. And I believe it was the same 2 that they basically tried to arrest me. And in this state that I was in, even though I was really ill, I really kind of You know, there was no way. But it was like a hyper-manic state by this point. I hadn't drank any water, I hadn't slept, wasn't eating, but I was really switched on. My brain and my body, it's amazing what the body can actually do, but my brain and body were so switched on. I remember them trying to arrest me. You talk about a fight or flight situation, you know, being in that fight situation. For the first time in my life, I was never a fighter. I did martial arts when I was young, a wee bit. Nothing too serious, wee bit of judo, wee bit of karate and stuff when I was younger. But I remember the time, for whatever reason, and the condition that I was in, and there was no way the guys were going to arrest me. Two of them were going to arrest me. It just wasn't happening. So they called in the Guardia Civil, and the Guardia Civil came, you know, mob-handed, loads of them. And it took them probably half an hour to get me in the van, you know, just kicked me up and down the promenade, thrown across restaurant tables. You know, just madness when I think it, just what I went through. To think that was actually me that went through that. You know, and then they took me back to the cells. Spent a night in the jail, and that in itself could be a book, it could be a film. You know, what happened that night. I managed to escape out the jail at one point. They came in to give me a beating after they gave me my food and my water, and I basically hit them with it, literally hit them with it. Again, just insanity. But they came in to give me a beating, 3 or 4 Guardia Civil at the same time in this big compound. And I managed to escape out the jail cell and out through the door and across the barrier and then running down the road. So they eventually caught me, obviously, running down the street barefoot, and they took me back to the cells and just kind of went to town on me. And I don't know whether they tried to kill me. What I do know is they almost killed me. The beating that they gave me and the things that they did to me, between kind of pistol whipping and these big metal extendable kind of little whip, water cannons. They had guns in my mouth. They were clicking guns against my head. And they took me back to the cells after I'd escaped. I actually punched one of the officers, which is the first time second time I punched anybody in my life. And I remember he kind of, there was definitely blood there. And then when they took me back to the cells, they came in one at a time. And I don't know how long it lasted, but it wasn't very pleasant. Stamping on my feet with these big military boots and all sorts of horrible stuff. You know, so really no well. Took me to the courts the next day, and I remember walking into the courts, and the lady that was representing me, the British consulate, just burst into tears when she saw me, you know, because I was in some state. My hand was broke, my face was smashed in, they'd smashed my nose with a gun. I've still got the scars across my nose and my hand. Ended up needing operations in my hand to put my hand back together again. One of I think my left foot was broke, my left foot. It was in a terrible place, terrible state. Anyway, for whatever reason, and whatever happened, and I still don't know to this day how I managed to get out of there, but I managed to get out of there. My dad came and got me and picked me up that very day. He came to get me. In fact, it was the next day. He was in Mallorca at the time. He had a wee house in Mallorca at the time, and he came and got me and took me back to Mallorca. And then from there, it was obvious that I wasn't well. They got me evaluated by a doctor, and then very quickly inside, you know, a couple of days I was in a private hospital, which I think is the only way you could do it over there. Operation to repair my body, put myself back together again, all the different scans, you know, brain scans and all the different stuff that they do. They couldn't believe my heart hadn't burst because of the beatings that I had. I was just covered, like hematomas and, you know, just unrecognisable, the scars and the scar tissue and the swelling all over my head. And I remember, you know, the nick my head was in, and really, not being in the best of places. And then after, you know, the hypermanic state I was in, you know, in terms of just being like really not well, ended up in a mental health hospital in Mallorca, and spent most of the summer in a mental health hospital. At one point, chained to a bed, giving me medication that, you know, you wouldn't wish on anybody. It was quite a period of time before I was deemed healthy enough to go back into this country. Flew back with a private jet with 2 doctors. That's the only way to let me fly back into the country, because there was obviously a risk. You know, so that's kind of where this started for me. That's where the wheels come off and the journey started for me. Came back here, and it was just it was an absolute nightmare. You know, between the doctors, the therapies, the medications. Again, I was sectioned under the Mental Health Act very, very quickly when they realised that there was nothing they could really do to help me within the normal system. I really needed contained, and that's what they did. And they really the first wee bit was to stabilise some sort of medication to just basically get me to stop, get me to calm down. That took quite a wee while. And between the summer of 1986 and into January 1987, you know, I wasn't in the best of places, like broken in every way, mental breakdown, nervous breakdown, absolutely an emotional breakdown, you know, separated from everything that I used to be, you know, like just absolute blackness. If you can imagine like hopelessness and blackness where you can't feel anything, and, you know, you're having panic attacks, and the PTSD that was coming up. And in terms of the stuff that the soldiers had done to me. Also, dealt with all sorts of stuff at different stages of my life, not just this beating stage, but obviously the vaccine trauma and everything that came from that was starting to come up at this point when I was starting to, go through all these different therapies. I dealt with sexual stuff at different stages of my life. That was all starting to come out. I'd never really considered that before. And if you take... At the time the doctor says you're never going to get out of here, they basically told me I wasn't going to basically make a way back into, the normal living and being. Like they said to my mum and dad, this is going to split your family up, this isn't going to work, like he's not going to make it back for here. And that was my life for the best part of 6 or 7 months. And then in January 1987, that's the dark side. That's all that's the dark side of the force. So excess, ego, drink, drugs, rock and roll, chasing money, lust, just the 7 deadly sins. I had probably had more than 7 deadly sins where I was at that point, and it left me in a place where I was completely broken. There was nothing left of me. I say hopelessness is the worst thing I've ever experienced. Complete blackness, couldn't feel anything, which was horrific. No feelings and no emotions, like dead on the inside. And I remember saying to my wife, God bless her, Jill went through the whole thing with me. I remember saying to her between Christmas and the start of the year in 1997, I don't know if I'll ever feel anything ever again, which was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. A young man at 20, probably 25 by that point, and not being able to feel anything, like no feelings and no emotions, and just this real cloud of depression, and as well as the panic attacks, which were horrific. Anybody that's ever had panic attacks will know what I'm talking about. The world would cave in on me, and you'd be lying on the floor because of like a physical, literal weight that'd been on top of your shoulders. And then also the other one where your heart feels like it's going to explode. Your heart rate's up through the roof, and your chemistry's all over the place, and just really not well. And then January 1987. Excuse me, take a wee drink before we talk about the light. January 1987, I met a man that was working on this kind of stuff. He was working on personal development. And I did one session with him where he taught me to breathe, took me through a breathing session, like Yoga Nidra, which is just basically a guided script, and basically switched off my nervous system, got me to this place of relaxation, which I'd never had before. I'd never experienced anything like this before. And because I was in such a hyper state up to this point, I've been really not well, and been really switched on, and this chronic stress that comes from trauma and PTSD, where it's really locked into your nervous system and there's no escaping it. It was like a living hell. Couldn't sleep, hadn't slept for months by this point. Every time I closed my eyes and was drifting off to sleep, I'd feel like guns in my mouth, and you would be dreaming that guns were going off, and you're just insanity. And in this session that this man did with me, basically took me through this guided session, switched off my nervous system, and something happened during that one session. It was literally one session that put the light back on inside of me, and I'm eternally grateful to that man for doing that for me. Lawrence Clifford, his name is, who still does this work to this day. He's the man that basically pulled me out of the hole, and gave me a second chance. Up to that point, there was no way, I don't think I was making my way back. I'd probably still been on medication or in the hospitals to this day if I hadn't met him, because where I was and how sick I was, and how it wasn't getting any better. I remember the doctors at the time, the medications that I now know about, that were talking about, I wouldn't have been here because my liver and my kidney wouldn't have made it. Going on 28, 29 years later, it wouldn't have happened. So put the light back on, helped me remember and reconnect back to some version of a previous incarnation of Jim on that very first day. And at the end of the session, he gave me a hug, and he says, look, everyone's going to be okay, we'll get this, you're going to be fine. And he gave me hope, he basically gave me hope. And when you give hope to somebody who's hopeless, I can't really explain how life-changing that was, and how powerful it was, to actually think there's a possibility that I could get back. And I felt almost normal for the first time since, even before that happened in Ibiza, the partying and where I was at that time and all that kind of stuff, so it was a real, I suppose a glimpse of what was possible, and I might get a second chance. And when I left that day, I remember everything had changed. My whole world had changed. I was off the medication by this point. That's something, they stopped the medication a couple of times, which you shouldn't do, the medication that I was on, but they basically gave my mum and dad permission to be my own pharmacist, and if he feels okay, then start to reduce his medicine. That's what they said when I left one of the psychiatric hospitals, and they said, like, let's just fucking do this, let's stop it. And we stopped all the pills at the one time, and I had a massive crash. It was horrific. That was one of the worst things I experienced, just really like the world caving in on you, literally. And so when this happened, I was probably clean a couple of weeks by this point. had this experience with this man, and basically from that point, January 1987, when the light came back on, there was like a rebirth. It was almost like a brand new human being was born, and the version of Jim from before was so long gone. When you go through something like that, like a life-changing experience like that, you'll never be the same ever again. Certainly that's been the way that it's worked out for me. And when I was given a second chance, because it had been so black and so dark, absolutely like suicidal, just really, really hard to explain if you've never been through it, how bad that is. That's why when I meet people that are in that place, I've got so much empathy and so much compassion for people that are struggling, because whether it's from really light anxiety to full-blown like chronic manic depression for me at one point, and then being suicidal and like being hopeless, and just the world caving in on you, panic attacks, no sleeping, chronic stress, like just all of that. The PTSD was horrific, coming from so many different areas, like mental, physical, emotional, like just heartbroken, like done and dusted. There was no way back. So when you get a second chance for that place, then I can't remember actually thinking at the time, like, I'm going to make this happen, I'm going to do something about this. But it was such relief of experiencing that amount of contrast and pain and suffering that, when the light did come back on, the choice that I made was to get on about this work and start to do this in a different way, because it had been so life-changing for me. And I basically followed Lawrence, for the first number of years. He'd already been to see Anthony Robbins. I believe the year before that, in 1996, he went to see Anthony Robbins. And he was buying books from a company in America called Nightingale Conant. Dale Nightingale was the first million seller of personal development recordings. What was the name of it? What was the name of it? I can't mind, it'll come back to me. So I basically got on his coattails. He was going to a course in the summer of that year by a man called Richard Bandler, who invented NLP. And he had cassettes, I would get a loan of his cassettes and tape them. I'd record them. And then very quickly, after a couple of months from that, I was back to work. I was back on the building sites, and I was back, doing what I was doing and starting to put my life back together again. But from that point on, there was no more doctors. I decided I wasn't going to go and see any more doctors. There's not been a bit of medication since. I stopped reading the newspapers. I stepped away from all of that. I basically started to live my life in a completely different way from anything I'd done in the past. So my new way of spending my time was personal development. I was listening to anybody I could get my hands on, anybody that basically Lawrence was listening to or would recommend. And a lot of the time, personal development's all about like being successful and getting the stuff and, fulfilling your potential. So it was like business coaches, people like Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, so many of them. They were the main ones for me, like listening to these different people talking about your philosophy and how you conduct yourself and what it means to be successful, and really kind of being intentional with your life, and instead of the way that I was before, where life was just happening to me and you would just make your way through it, and some things would happen good and some things not so good, and you would just dust yourself down every single day and just make your way through your life. That's kind of where I was, and this was a very different way of doing things. It was very much the case of like taking full responsibility for anything that came your way, and then having a plan, a working plan to make your way towards that. And for the first year and a half, 2 years probably, it was all about personal development. Changed my life completely. How you stand, how you breathe. I saw Robbins the year after that. So 1987 was the first time I trained by Anthony Robbins. 10,000 people down in London, firewalk. It was at the old Wembley. Just an amazing experience. 3 days, unleash the power within. I've still got the book somewhere. It's somewhere in this office or next door maybe. That from that original, the workshop. I've still got the original one, the very first one I went to in 1986, which was Richard Bandler as well. NLP practitioner maybe. He did it with a man called Michael Breen and Paul McKenna, who's obviously really famous. He was on TV at the time as a stage hypnotist, but the stuff that he was doing moved into more therapies, so NLP, helping people how to find relief for phobias and traumas and all that kind of stuff by changing how the brain works, in terms of they would use language patterns, and they would use ways of restructuring or reframing how you would see things. Bandler was incredible. I can't mind how long we spent with Bandler, the first course I went to, but by the time I left London with Richard, Bandler was a different human being. Bandler would just come in and talk for 2 or 3 hours. and just tell stories about being a Hell's Angel growing up in San Francisco and taking acid, and it was wild, absolutely wild. But at the same time, he was telling all these incredible stories about how they lived their lives and gang battles and the gangs that he was in, the Hell's Angels, all that kind of stuff. At the same time, he would be feeding in through NLP, so they're basically feeding in language that the unconscious mind goes straight in the unconscious mind. The conscious mind doesn't see it. After 3 or 4 days being with him and watching how he spoke and learning the language patterns, thanks to being there with Lawrence, then you would start to see some of the things that he would say and how he would use language to help people in so many different ways, and it certainly helped me. So that was a way for me. The first couple of years it was all about personal development, all about like becoming successful, being the man, which was great. It really helped me. It was very positive in my life. But at the same time, I didn't want to be the man anymore. I didn't want to be successful. Whatever happened to me in Ibiza and leading up to that, I was a completely different human being. And very quickly I get kind of bored with that. I had no desire to set goals, and Tony Robbins would get you up and set your anchors, so fire your nervous system and reach that peak state, and like incantations, and I always struggled with that. Very American, and it wasn't for me, and I just didn't do it. It was too hard. I didn't enjoy it, and never really felt like the desire to become something, to be successful, because leading up to that, my dad was really successful. My dad is really successful. What he did with his life, starting from nothing. And we grew up absolutely blessed because of my dad and mum's hard work. And that's the ethos that I had as well. Work hard, earn the money. That's what enables you to buy as much stuff as you want and be successful. And I knew even then that the answers weren't in that. I knew that even though that whole, as successful as I was, anybody looking in on me, I would be termed as a success. I had everything you could imagine. Beautiful girl who's still my wife, big fancy sports car. As a young man, money to burn, making fortunes at the weekend, doing cash jobs and then knocking your pan in all week, making really good money, buying the clothes, partying at the weekend, all the clothes, the watches. I had everything that you could imagine to be kind of termed as a success. And I didn't want that at this point. I was a different human being because of what happened to me. And so the personal development wasn't for me really. It's a great place to start, but for me, the thing that changed my life was spiritual development. That's the thing that came in probably after a couple of years. And there was a man called Wayne Dyer, who I was blessed to meet a couple of times. Spent time with him in London and then in Glasgow. It was a man called, Wayne Dyer that got me into spirituality. And I remember when I first heard of that changed everything. That everything was completely different by that point, because I knew that this was something different. And the way that Wayne Dyer was explaining at the time, it was almost like the perfect storm. He was just starting to release books and text content about spirituality, what God is, what meditation is, why you should meditate, what the real essence of the divine is, and also at the same time like picking holes in the stuff that I knew to be true. So things like organised religion, excuse me a wee second, the challenges with that, how religion separates, which we see just now every single day, but spirituality unites, and how things like meditation and what meditation actually was, and how the traditional way of doing things through the religion, you go to them and they're going to give you access to God. Normally when you die is a way to get it. You don't really get it in this lifetime. Certainly for Catholics, you lead this pious life and then you get to the end of it, and then hopefully if you've done everything right, you've not broke the commandments, then you might go to heaven. St. Peter might let you into the gates. If you've not done that and you've been a bit of whatever, then you might go the other way and end up downstairs in the fire, in hell with the devil and all that kind of stuff. And I always questioned that. Even as a young man, used to serve as an altar boy. I had a fantastic priest, a real holy man. He was a great man, Father Gallagher, and I remember having experiences with him when he was on the church. A lot of the stuff was in Latin back then, and the smells with the thurible, the incense and the stuff they would burn, it was frankincense or incense they would burn, and the hymns and the geometry within the church obviously matters, and the vibration of what they were singing about, and him himself, his intention was just an incredibly powerful human being. My brother's first wife was actually his niece, so I had some great conversation with her just a couple of years ago about who he was as a man and all that kind of stuff, and hear a wee bit more about his life. He was young when he left our parish, but I remember just these really profound experiences. But when he left, the second priest, I was maybe a wee bit older, so probably just about to go to high school, stopped altar boy stuff when I went to high school, but I remember asking the priest at the time a couple of questions. I remember looking at me one of the questions was what's Christmas all about? Why is it so commercialised? Why is there like so many people are so much pressure and stress to buy these presents. Like that doesn't really feel what Christmas should be about. I was probably, what would that be, 9, 10 at that time. I remember them looking at me as if, you fucking know too much, like, and that was way back, I just felt there wasn't something quite right. We had great experiences with Father Gallagher, all that kind of good stuff, but always felt there was something, not quite right about it. And also the separation game, as I call it. Some of my friends that I played football with at night time and in the weekends, went to different schools, so Celtic Rangers games, you were taught to hate them, literally taught to hate them, like that's the house that we grew up in, just because of, Irish Catholic family and all the challenges my grandfather faced when he was come back for the war and couldn't get a job because he was a Catholic. I mean, how mad is that? They had signs up in the workplace, no Catholics need apply. He had 9 kids trying to feed his, family after coming back for the war, and then you can't get a job because of your allegiance to one way of worshipping God. It's like, come on, the fuck, so and back then it was very different as well. It was very much Celtic Rangers and that was it, and you choose your side, and then whatever house you're born into, that was it. So always kind of questioned that, always kind of knew there wasn't something quite right in it. And then when Wayne Dyer started talking about spirituality and started talking about what God really was, and then talking about the ancient texts and the ancient teachers, and I went on a journey. I really did. I went on a journey that's basically lasted to this day. Since January 1987, I've been on it. But when the spirituality stuff came in, everything changed. I started looking into meditation. Wayne Dyer at the time, he wasn't doing guided meditation, but he was guiding me towards different teachers. People like, I was starting to read a wee bit of Rumi. I was starting to Patanjali. One of the books that Wayne Dyer spoke about was the Yogic Aphorisms of Patanjali in one of his recordings, and that's he's the dude that created yoga. So going back 5,000 years, these are the books that I was reading. I was on this real devotional, intentional journey it called me, and even though at the start I wasn't really getting much from it, I was really called to go onto this path for whatever reason, and it's like, right at the start, it's clear as day I can remember it. I remember reading something for the Buddha, and the Buddha says, once you hear the word enlightenment, nothing else will ever do. This was probably a couple of years into my spiritual journey, and I remember thinking at the time, that's it. I'm going to become enlightened. I'm going to experience enlightenment. I had no idea what it meant, no idea how to get there. I had a meditation practice probably at the time. I would get up and, early in the morning time, I would start work probably 6:30, 7 o'clock every single morning. That's before we had kids. But meditation through Wayne Dyer was talking about meditation and what you're meant to do with it, and what the purpose was and all that kind of stuff. So I set the intention to meditate, and I started getting up out of bed. Never had to set the alarm once. I would set what was it called? You would set like an imaginary alarm before you went to bed. This is all the stuff with personal development I was doing. So I had all these different tools and techniques, and I found myself getting woke up kind of 3-4 o'clock in the morning, because Wayne Dyer was doing that. He would say we'd wake up at the same time every single day, 3:33 or whatever it was, or 3:43 in the morning time. So I started finding myself getting called out of bed in the middle of the night after a really short period of time, and I would sit in silence. I would sit in meditation. My plan was to experience enlightenment. My plan was to, heal myself at the time, I suppose, try and get to a place that I'd heard about him talking about, I knew existed, didn't know how to get there, but I was intentional with it, and very quickly that intention became devotional. It became a way of life for me. Right from the very start, I changed my diet. So I bought a juicer when I come back from Tony Robbins, and I started juicing every single day, and that's been every single day almost to this day. After 28, 29 years, I've never missed a single day unless I've not been in this country or not been able to get access to my juicer. The amount of juices I've been through over the years, the amount of fruit that I've consumed and veggies because of juicing. Changed my input in terms of the books I was reading, the people I surrounded myself with. When I come back from Ibiza, every single person that was in my life was done away with. My phone was basically taken off me. That was the start of mobile phones. So my phone was taken away. There was no social media. So I was really on this really devotional, intentional journey. My books, that would be like my internet, like reading the books and studying the books and listening to the tape cassettes over and over and over again, so that I could really verbatim, I knew the tape cassettes, the Wayne Dyer tape cassettes. I'd be pulling up to building sites, and I'd be listening to tape recordings about meditation and Buddha and Patanjali and God and spirituality and enlightenment and all this kind of stuff. Then going to work all day, being surrounded by people, eating rolls and sausage, and during their lunch break, just that animal level of consciousness. That's what it was. That's what the building site was back then. Just really, really kind of low level conversations, as you can imagine, guys on a building site, and then at the same time being privy to that and watching that, and then at the same time basically kind of doing my own thing that nobody knew about. For the first 18 years nobody knew about this. I was doing it for myself. My plan was to absolutely experience enlightenment. So up at bed every day, sitting in meditation, never missed a single day. I've never missed a single day with meditation since I started. I just don't. It became part of like who I was and what I was all about. And it took me 18 years every single day to get it. And eventually I got the stuff that they're talking about, the stuff that you read about in the text and the stuff you hear about in terms of what enlightenment is. That took me 18 years every single day to get that. And I believe that's what experienced enlightenment. And enlightenment just means, for anybody that doesn't know, it's the direct experience of the divinity that's inside of you. And that's really what the kind of the core, and I suppose the intention with all of this work is to help people experience something that I experienced. It took me a long time to get there. That's really what this is all about. That's what this work is all about. And once I experienced it, and how I experienced it, and how it came through, and the different steps over many, many years and hundreds of thousands of hours, literally every single day, most of the time twice a day, and last thing at night as well. Diet was impeccable at points, always juicing, cleaned it up, only putting good stuff in, so there was no more, never drank for 18 years, still don't drink to this day. There was certainly no more drugs, there was no partying, there was no more nightclubs, there was none of that kind of stuff, it was just really this devotional, intentional path to experience enlightenment. At the same time we got married, I was starting to raise a young family. I had a wee business that I was going about my way, and just kind of quiet and humble, and really the stuff I was getting, the way I was getting fed by this work, it was more than enough. It was fulfilling every single desire and every need that I had. And with outside my wife, nobody knew about it. Really did. And my mum, before she passed, when I went public with it, she was like, "What do you do?" And by that point, I'd mastered myself. I'd got it for myself. I'd experienced the self, the true self, the higher self. I'd experienced enlightenment. Which is to experience the God, the divinity that we carry inside us. I'd got that, and it's that's the light part of it. That's the enlightened part. That's why the story is darkness to light, from the low levels of consciousness and being in the gutter and in the sewer and in the jungle and in the zoo, and then transcending your way through all the different stages to eventually experience enlightenment, which for me, very difficult to explain. You need to experience it. As Wayne Dyer said, you can't get wet for the word water. You need to jump in and splash about and see what it feels like. The way that it happened for me was sitting in meditation, and this presence came in, and it happened quite a few times up to this point, but this time that it came in, and I was able to surrender to it, like hand over whatever this is, this lower version of Jim, this lower self, the ego, the mind. It almost happened a few times before that, and I remember thinking at the time, this is going to be great, I'm going to be able to share this with people and maybe show off a wee bit, but this time, after, and when that would happen, you would then lose that feeling or the opportunity to get this really life-changing experience. It would disappear for 6 months to a year sometimes. It would come back now and again, but this one time, for whatever reason, I was able to get it, or it was able to get me, and I experienced it. I experienced the power of the divine, which feels like love. When I came back from it, lasted a couple of hours. When I came back, straight away I was like, all right, that's why they say that God is love, because this vibration, this field of consciousness that felt as if it came in, and then I became it and it became me. At the same time, I became the tree, the blade of grass. I experienced universal consciousness. I believed at the time, and I felt at the time that I became everything. So the idea of separation from another human being or any sentient living being was impossible. It was almost like I literally experienced everything. I could experience the consciousness of what it felt like to be the tree, to be Mother Nature, to be the elements. That's what it felt like. An incredible experience, it really was. It's happened a few times since. You can't go and make it happen, unfortunately, or I would be there all the time. First time it lasted a couple of hours. When I came back, everything had changed. The healing had taken place, massive shift in my consciousness, just massive transformation, all the stuff that I'd been carrying into it and the desires to heal myself, that was all done and dusted. Saw things in a completely different way. What I just said there about, experiencing the union with other human beings, and realising that at some level of when you reach a certain level of awareness and you get into a certain level of consciousness, are able to experience that, then we're all one. Absolutely, I experienced that. That was real for me. So when I came back, the whole world had changed, and then at that point, the next question, was like, right, okay, how can I pass this on? How can I give this to people? Or how can I help people who are seeking really experience what I got? Why? Because what it had done for me, the way that I felt when I came back from it, the understanding of what God is, the understanding what the field of consciousness is, to actually become it, to literally become it. Not just feel the presence of God, but to become the presence of the divine, so to be in that field. And it felt like love, it felt the way I love my wife, my ways, but just in a way you can't even imagine or even explain. When I spend any time thinking about it and get into my heart, it'll bring me to tears, it was so overpowering. And that level of vibration, that level of consciousness, what you find is it fixes every single thing that it touches. Wayne Dyer would say that God doesn't know what cancer is, God can't heal cancer. So if you're looking for a miracle, then you need to become the divine. You need to basically raise your vibration and allow the divine to raise your vibration so you can become that, and then the cancer disappears, disease disappears. So from that point onwards, everything changed, obviously. I got what I was looking for. I was then on a very different page. My intention then wasn't to get it for myself. I'd got it for myself. I believe I had mastered the self. I'd mastered the lower self previously by the disciplines and the diet. You talk about freedom and discipline, like I was just never missed a single day, on it all the time. Again, probably part of my addictions, the ways that I would live my life. But, the direct experience of it and becoming it, then obviously everything changed. And then I went from getting it for myself and really experiencing life for myself, like how can I pay this forward? How can I help other people get this? Because it was so transformational, life-changing for me, and really what I understood was if it's in me, then it must be in everybody. So if it's in everybody, then why are more people not getting around about it? Why are no people on this pursuit as I was, to try and experience this? And then you realise that, this information, then certainly back then, this is just when the internet was starting, it wasn't readily available. And, the whole idea of what God is, going to church and being in religion and the priest telling you stories out of a book that may or may not be true, I don't know. If Jesus Christ, I am all about, I love Lord Jesus Christ, absolutely, the essence of what that is. But at the same time, you've really got to question everything. That when you understand what the Catholic Church is all about, in particular in Rome and all that kind of stuff, and you see, what they've done to the world, is certainly in the past, and maybe even to this day still, with the different secret societies and whatever, without going down any rabbit holes, please. But the way that the church, what it did to the world, how it amassed its fortune, the amount of people that had to die in the name of God, and you think, fucking that can't be right. There's definitely something not right about that. That's where normal people believe. When I talk about God now, the amount of people in the past that have been turned off because I think I'm some sort of religious maniac, or it's some sort of cult that I'm leading, and it's like, nah, that isn't what this is. Spirituality is the ability to experience the divinity that's inside you without anybody. That meditation, the purpose of meditation is to be in union with God, not just to feel it, but eventually to become it. That's my interpretation. That's what I got from it. So very, very different from the way that it's sold, even today in this world, in terms of the different churches and the religions and how all that stuff is set up. It's something that, so many, the separation game I call that, there's so many different bits to it, and everybody's fighting against each other. Every single war, even what's going on in the Middle East just now, all that's about who's the most significant to God, and when you understand the God that I know, then it's insanity in this world and whatever it is, this realm that we live in. A lot of people believe, the darkness that's in this world and the satanic influence that's in this world and the way that it's set up. It's designed to keep you away from God in terms of what the real essence of the divine is. And most people don't even believe in God, or even if they do know about God, then they think it's that idea, of religion and heaven and hell and the afterlife. If you're a good Catholic, then you're going to get into heaven. If you're maybe an alright Catholic, you go to purgatory, and then you've got to rely on your relatives and your pals to pray for you to see if they can maybe let you in by petition. And if you've been a bastard or you've been fucking anything less than you were meant to be, then you maybe go straight to hell. All that kind of stuff, you start to see through it, the stories and with all that stuff, unless I see it with my own two eyes, the stuff I now talk about, everything that I teach and what I talk about, it's my own experience, so I can now speak and say, this is what I went through, this is what I got from this is what I learned, and this is how I did it. Very different from somebody saying, Jesus did that, and you just need to believe it's because it's in the Bible. I'm not buying that for anybody or anything, unless I see it with my own two eyes. That's why the circus just now in this literal zoo and jungle that we're living in. You know, there's so much information, misinformation, and there's so many like falsehoods. People have no idea. They can't tell the difference between truth and falsehood. They don't know, because we've been lied to our whole life. Even, you know, what this is, what this planet is, the significance of the divine and what God is, you know, and what that's all about. If you don't believe in God, you believe that we are here just by happenstance, as if it's some sort of fluke that we're on this ball hurtling through space. We, you know, nowhere to go after this, you know, just what's the fucking point? So at that point, if that is the reality, then go and have a party, you know, go drink drugs and rock and roll, like go on, enjoy yourself for the rest of your days the best that you can. But if you do believe in the divine and there's a divine plan, and you know, as I do, you know, that we come through it and we carry it inside of us, and when we die we go straight back to it. You go back into spirit, back into the field. I know this because of the experience that I had in meditation. When you understand, you know, what God actually did, you know, that interpretation of the God, then at that point, then everything means something. There is a plan. There is a God's will. There's something going on in the background. The source energy that we all come through, that's enabling all this to happen. You know, the life that's in the trees and the planet and the universe. It's like at that point, everything starts to make sense. You know, so for me then, when I came out of that experience and really got enlightenment, when I had that really life-changing experience, then the plan was to then give it to people. And because it's so life-changing, because it was so profound and so powerful, you think that would be easy. But it's not, it really isn't, for many, many different reasons. And so after a couple of years of when I came back for that, I got a wee bit bored. It was almost like, what's next? You know, where do I go from here? And that's when the Vortex came through. The Vortex came through in 2016. I had this building that I'm in just now. I was living upstairs. I had the real kind of desire to kind of, you know, give this a go and try and help people, try and take this to the world and give them the experience that I'd got. Why? So we can then, you know, go and get everybody living in these higher states and being happy and being joyful and experience the feelings of things like unconditional love that is God, you know, that feeling of the divine love, understanding what that is, and then realising, you know, that you carry it inside of you. That was the plan. And, you know, so that's really what the Vortex is. That's really what this work is. It's in different parts to it. The Vortex itself, the tools that I teach, the techniques that I teach, the way that I share it. There's two bits to it. There's, first of all, there's a kind of there's a physical self mastery, you know. So that's why when we do breath work and relaxation and becoming aware and intentional with your life, taking back control, taking back your power, realising the power that lies inside of you. You know, when you start to get on about it in the beginning, people that are coming in. Like the lad that was asked on the building site, like, what is it you do? So like, well, where do you start? You can't talk about enlightenment because they're not going to understand. They're going to think you're off your fucking nut if you're honest. But the basic stuff, you know, things like breathwork, things like cold exposure, things like relaxation, the significance of sleeping properly, how to sleep, you know, how to eat properly and take away the inflammation from your diet. The basics, I would call them, the kind of starters for 10. That's the kind of first part of the Vortex. That's the starter when you come in. And really kind of learning things like awareness, the power of awareness to see what you're doing to yourself, the power of awareness to see, you know, what the world is trying to do to you. You walk through that supermarket, as I did this morning, and see the foods that they try and sell you, and you look at the back of them and like, oh, fucking good luck with that. And you actually look at it. I think in Tesco's this morning, Lana, there was probably half a dozen organic produce, you know, like things that are actually like food, like real food, like proper whole food, grown for the ground, grown for the trees, how nature intended it. And the rest of it's made in some factory somewhere, you know, with, you know, all the stuff that's designed to fill you up and, you know, satiate your hunger, salt, fat, sugars, you know, the stuff that really kind of fills you up and makes you feel good, the way it's designed and the way that it's set up to sell it to you. And, you know, it's like when you see the power just in that, something that the awareness to see what you're doing to yourself, just what you put in your mouth, and you look at the world and how fucking messed up people are, just now how sick and in dis-ease people are. One of the biggest challenges what we eat, of course it is. I know many people, or I've met many people over the years in their 20s and their 30s, have never actually sat down and had a proper home cooked meal. It's been either takeaways or fast food their entire life. And then you look at them in their 20s and 30s and wonder why they're having like panic attacks, anxieties, you know, heart conditions, the medication that are on, like the amount of people that are on like beta blockers and all, like young men. because of heart conditions and health conditions. So awareness is such a huge part of it. The awareness to see, what they're trying to do to you, but also what you're doing to yourself. So that the first start is basically the power of awareness, coming in and really learning through the information I'm providing. And I have been blessed with some of the most fantastic teachers this world has ever seen, certainly over the last 50, 60 years. So all of this stuff isn't mine. I've just put it all together and I've got my take on things. There's a lot of it is original to me. Most of it's original to me, the stuff that I teach. I take stuff and I make it better and easier, certainly from my perspective, for other people to get. A lot of the stuff is too complicated, I find, when you're trying to make your way through it. And who's got 20 years to work this stuff out? People don't, so it needs to be as quick as we can, especially in these times we're living in just now. So having the awareness is to see, what you're doing to yourself, what they're trying to do to you, and the awareness to see things like tap water, things like the poisons that are in tap water, things like the significance of what happens if you're drinking 5 or 6 coffees a day and you think it's not affecting you. Fillings, what's the amalgam fillings, the metal fillings that I took out my mouth probably 10 years ago now. What's in the food, how they grow the food, what they spray the food with, the damage that does to your bacteria in your gut. What's going on in the skies, what's happening in the rivers. It's the whole thing. Having the awareness is to see that, the reason you're sick and the reason you know where you'd like to be, there's a reason for it. Having that basic awareness and basically waking up. The first part is to wake up and realise there's a different way of doing it. Not just, this is how it is because of this how they told me. The old kind of model of go to school, get an education, get your degree or your job or your profession, whatever it is, work all your days, get a mortgage, get married, have your wains, retire, and then, look forward to whatever it is, playing golf or your hobbies, and then you die a wee bit later. That's how it's sold to us. That was the kind of only way of living and being. And then when you wake up and you become aware, then you start to realise there's a different way of doing things. And that's really what this is. The Vortex itself, it's all about the art of intentional living. It's all about the understanding that, life doesn't happen to you. When I was really sick and really not well, life was absolutely happening to me. It couldn't get any worse. You talk about digging a hole, you expect the worst. I remember going out to those meetings, especially I was in the Priory in Glasgow for a short period of time, which was the worst couple of weeks of my life. It was an absolute nightmare. The therapists and how they would try to use their therapies and their medications to make you feel better. Talking about your traumas, talking about the stuff you've been through doesn't help. After doing it once, so when you're trying to relive it and trying to make some understanding of something that happened 30 years ago, and you would probably like to forget it, when you actually understand the damage that it's done to you and how you carry that forward. So they therapists that came for Richard Bandler, that wasn't mine. Because they're basically, a lot of the times you would leave and you would feel as if your fucking soul had been raped. You would feel a lot worse, and I hear that almost every single day. The amount of people that go through therapy, talking therapies and reliving their experiences over and over. And eventually the therapist will say to them, this isn't really working, like on your way, and a lot of the times, after 1 or 2 sessions, if you don't start to feel better or start to make progress, that's probably not the best way to do things. That's why things like life coaching, direct debit for the rest of your days, 50 quid a week for the rest of your days. This is all about transcending. This is all about not just like being able to live with it, but actually healing yourself and getting beyond it. That's really what this is all about. So the art of intentional living means that, instead of life happening to you, or even the next step, which I used to believe, that's really kind of, again, for a short period of time, was that God had a plan for me. And that might be the case. And I think there is a bit of that in it. There is some sort of divine will and divine plan working through you if you're tuned in. But the next step up for that is to realise that life actually, it comes from you. It doesn't happen to you. God's not really got that much of a plan for you. We're blessed with free will to do whatever we want. So the stuff that people do, would God really kind of sign up for that and kind of promote that or help you towards their goals? I don't think so. So, to realise that life actually comes from you, that's what it's about, and when you understand and you get to that place of realising through direct experience the power that you carry inside of you, the power that you carry inside your heart and inside your soul, then you realise that anything is possible, and that is the art of intentional living. And it is an art. It is dead simple, but it is no easy. But there is a way of doing it, and that's what I've been doing for the last 28 years, is working that out for myself. And then for the last, 8-9 years now, I've been teaching it, opening up my doors and sharing it professionally over the last couple of years. For the first 22, 23, 24 years, I did it for free, just basically trying to help people. I was still working in the family business up until my mum passed in 2020. So up to that point, I was really just helping people for free, trying to give it away, at the same time learning how to become a coach. One of the lads actually asked me last night, how did you get into this? What was your pathway into this? And it was really an organic path of never really wanting to be a coach, always the desire to help people. Always the desire to, when I got it for myself, for where I had been with the depression, the anxiety and the panic attacks and the world caving in on me, and as low as I was, when I came back for that, really empathy and compassion for other human beings that are suffering, then the desire to help them, that's when the Vortex opened in 2016. And it started off, I suppose I was kind of like an average life coach. I was kind of half teaching the stuff that I'd done, but there wasn't any kind of real structure to it. I was just trying to help people and with basic awarenesses, in terms of diet and the significance of sleeping properly and being aware of who you're spending your time with and how everything affects everything. Taking back control and being intentional with how you do that. And everything matters, really every single bit of it matters. So that's kind of the stuff that I'd be doing. And the way that I learned was during my work. I would meet between probably 50 and 100 people every single day, travelling around South Lanarkshire, measuring windows for my dad at this point. And I'd walk into houses and before you knew it, for whatever reason, people would be opening up and telling you about their depression or somebody that had just suicided or the challenges they were facing with mental health or physical well-being. And I found myself over a number of years just kind of helping people by talking to them and listening to them and really kind of explaining to them what I was doing and how things had helped me, telling them a wee bit about my story. And when they could see where I was at this point, which was I was doing really well by this point, I was starting to really get it, and there's something really exciting about helping other people. Once you really get it for yourself, then that's the only thing to do is to give this away. What I get from helping other people, that's my juice, that's the money for me. It's like the feelings of helping another person to find a relief or get to that place they're trying to go. That's the juice that feeds all of this. So the tools at the time were really kind of basic, and it wasn't really until probably 2016, I would say 15, 16, where I had a couple of life-changing experiences, one through energy work, so specifically angelic Reiki, and then it was really kind of discovering cold exposure and learning how to breathe with full intention, so the power of the breath, and then going on a journey with that. We started in 2016, and by the time I went and trained with Wim Hof at the end of 2017, the cold exposure and learning the science. And again, I went to school to see my girl. I used to go to school 5th and 6th year to see my bird, Jill, even though she was my bird at the time, but that was really it. There was nothing in school for me. Certainly wasn't for education. But by the time I got to 2016, 2017, starting to learn about the power of the breath, start to learn about the power of cold exposure, starting to learn the education side of that I never ever had a reason for doing it at school. My brain didn't. When your brain does not have a reason for learning, it doesn't learn. So when I basically had a real strong purpose, when I sat in that ice bath for the first time, and what it did to my pain, I had a fractured neck. I thought I had a fractured neck at the time. My knee was torn in half. My toe was going the wrong way because of jiu-jitsu. So the pain that I was in, lying on the floor in tears, not taking any painkillers because I didn't do that for a long time by this point. I'd given up all the medications and looking for something to help me. And I found cold exposure through Wim Hof, and I found his type of breathing, which is like a tumo breath, like really powerful breathing, which at the time for me was great. I was just coming off the back of the previous probably 10, 15 years of excess training. So martial arts, I was teaching karate at one point to kids. I was doing ultra distance running. The furthest I ever ran was 100 kilometres in one day, 18 hours that took me. Ultra distance cycling, full distance Ironman events. I was training probably 30 hours a week at the time, working the same 30 hours a day at that point, raising a family, just kind of on it full time all the time. And the stuff that I'd put together, the way that I'd put it all together, the way that I was living my life, the way that I was kind of making my way through this, when the Vortex opened in 2016, it was a simple desire to help other people. It was just really kind of, I got it for myself, now how can I pass this on? And that cold exposure and the ice changed my life completely. The way my pain was taken away in that the very first time I sat in an ice bath was life-changing. The way that it switched off my nervous system was life-changing. And I went on a journey with Wim for probably the best part of, when was that, 2006, 17, 18, probably a couple of years with Wim Hof. Became an instructor with Wim, one of the first in the world to become an instructor with Wim. That happened in 2017. Was putting sometimes hundreds of people in the cold at the one time in the lochs of Scotland for free, all for free. Breathing events, helping other people, all my own time, part-time, away from work. travelled a fair bit of the country. I was working with Heal Scotland at that kind of charity at the time, and just really helping as many people as I could. And really it was then, the Vortex had just opened, cold exposure, before it was really a thing. But what I was seeing with the breath work, in terms of switching off the nervous system, what that did for things like depression, what that was doing for people who were lost, people that were suffering, especially the heavier stuff. I've always found the heavier stuff being drawn to me, again, because of my own experience. So soldiers coming in with PTSD, somebody coming in with childhood sexual trauma, somebody coming in, that had been through a loss or grieving. These are all the things that I've been through personally myself. And the way of fixing it in the world through the therapies and the medications and all the suppression tactics that the medication does, and even a lot of the therapies as well, the way that goes about it, that stuff didn't work. So for me then, coming out and realising what this stuff had done for me, when I was sharing the things that I was doing and putting people in the cold and teaching them to breathe and just really kind of switching off their nervous system and giving them a break for the chronic stress they were under. The damage you can do to yourself just by the way you think, that chronic overthinking, that's the stuff that kills you. That's the stuff literally that makes you no well. We understand epigenetics now. You can either upregulate or downregulate the gene expression by where you spend your time. What you're thinking about is creating the chemistry within your body. So you can literally regrow your body. You can heal anything that you desire if you do certain things. So when people are coming in, there were so many different ways that I could help people. And many times it was one session. Because when you switch off the stress, and you get people to tell their story once, and then you say to them, right, if you tell that story ever again, it's like, fucking shame on you. Now we need to get beyond it. Now we need to tell a different story. And there's a way to heal and go through all of that. But if you continuously tell the same story and you continuously look back to something that happened 25 years ago, and you're looking for a different results, and you're looking to heal yourself, and you're looking to get beyond it, in my experience, it never ever worked that way. So very, very quickly, the success that I was getting, really the first part of the programme. The programme is what I teach within the Vortex. I'll speak about that in a wee minute. But the first part of the programme is the basics. It's the breath work, it's the relaxation, it's the sleep, it's the diet. It's the ability to do away with the things that are stimulating your brain, the things that are switching on your nervous system. It's all of that. Really kind of taking back control and taking back your power, and realising that what you do to yourself, the way that you live your life, that's obviously going to impact how you make your way through your life. How you feel is the most important part. Well-being is everything. That's why this is a centre for well-being, because I lost every single bit of it. I lost all my well-being. So to get that back, and there's many, many levels to that as well in terms of how good you can feel. And that becomes the work. The work, it becomes like, if you're in a good place and you're feeling good and you're happy and you're joyful and you've got love in your heart and you're living not in your head and your mind and your intellect, but you're living in a different way in terms of being conscious and being in your feelings, your guidance system, using your feelings and your emotions, as well as your mind as well, I suppose, to a lesser extent, in terms of how you make your way through your life. But when you start to, teach the stuff that I'd learned and share with people, what was available to them, to anybody, then normally after one session, that was it. It was done and dusted. People would leave here with like a cape on, especially if I was managed to get them in the cold. 3-4 hours with somebody, in fact 2 or 3 hours with somebody, switch off their stress, teach them to breathe, how they can sleep at night time, put them in the cold, so they've got a tool to basically to manage their stress and to bring in all the good hormones, the things that just make you feel incredible. Good stress hormones will change your life in so many different ways. So inside one session I was seeing like literal miracles. Miracles is something that God does, so that's why when I use the word miracles, again, I get the commas, because these miracles, just switching somebody's stress off, somebody getting a good night's sleep, and switching off their overactive mind, that can be like a literal miracle. Before you get to the real miracles, somebody getting beyond sexual abuse they've carried for 30 years, and then inside one session, where they get it up and get it out, and they maybe cry for the first time, because they get back into their heart, they get out of their head and try to make sense of it and try to like find the answers or make some sort of, and trying to make sense of why it happened or the reasons for it or the part that you played in. Or like, fuck all of that, none of that matters at this point, it's fucking 30 years ago. So it's how you get beyond all of that. And because I was sharing the stuff that I had done, and again, like creating these shortcuts and these bridges, which is what I do with all of this, then people were experiencing like miracles inside one session. Literal miracles, they're just really kind of leaving the stuff behind, like letting it go, and seeing that it was absolutely shite and it was terrible and it's maybe ruined their life up to this point. But now going forward, like if you want to keep living in that place, keep doing what you're doing. If you want the next 20, 30 years to be exactly like that, and end up in a place that you don't want to be, which for many people will end up in either dis-ease or suicide because of that much time and chronic stress and inflammation in the brain, and just no sleeping properly, and then eating, like comfort eating and eating rubbish, to comfort yourself. It only ever ends up in one place, So the stuff that I was sharing, the tools and the techniques, the basics, right at the entry level stuff, that's the starter for 10, so you can manage and navigate your way through this life. The second part is, what it's all about for me. You don't get to play in the second part unless you master the first part. You need to do that first. The second part is a spiritual journey. That's really what the Vortex is really all about. Like the reconnection back to the self, the higher self, the divine essence that we carry inside of us. And then the lower self, Jim, the human being, the dad, the husband, the father, the guy that does this, this lower self stuff, navigating my way through life, trying to make the best that I can here, trying to survive it, trying to get to a place of thrival, hopefully, in this lifetime, which is really difficult in these times we live in. But spirituality, the spiritual journey is something that everybody should be doing. Why? Because it's inside all of us. We come through from source energy, we come through from the divine, and we carry it inside of us. That's the bit they don't tell you. When you die, you get right back to it. As soon as you snuff it, you're straight back into spirit. The body's done and dusted, and this divine essence that we carry, it goes straight back into the field. You become one with all of it. But enlightenment in this lifetime, the reason for doing that is so you don't need to die to get it. And now I'm actually looking forward to death in some ways. And the lower self, Jim, the ego, that's a nightmare, preparing for death and thinking about death and giving all this up. The ego, the self-preservating ego, that just every single thing is geared towards me and my and I and the stuff that I've achieved and how much money I've made and the things that I've done. That's all the lower consciousness, lower levels of consciousness. That's all the stuff that you do in this lifetime. That's not who you really are. And that question I ask people all the time, like, who are you? Do you know who you are? And they tell you their job and they tell you like their achievements and their legacy if you're really successful. But that's just the stuff that we do, So beyond that, and that's important, of course it is, in this life, this realm we're in for whatever reason, of course you need to navigate your way through it. There's ways to do that properly, I do believe, which no many people are doing, but to navigate your way through that, but at the same time, the spiritual journey is something that, certainly in the West is different maybe now because of the internet and the information and the inspiration has been passed on in a different way, but, the spiritual journey, things like meditation, things like the ability to go inside and know the self, to reconnect back into your heart, to reconnect back into the soul, to know you, the real you, the bit that can never die, then, surely that's what it's all about. That's really what it should be about. So that's what this is. You've got the program. The program that I teach is the last 20 years of my life experience. It's an entire online system. People asking all the time, like, how do I get around about it? What is it first and foremost, and then how do I get around about it? And that's something, that depending on, and again, I've tried this so hard over the last couple of years since we created the program. Since Michael and Fern came in and helped me create the program, all the information is now documented. So how to breathe, how to sleep, the cold exposure, heat exposure, relaxation, meditation, explaining how it all goes together, but then giving the direct experience of it through guidance. So taking people into meditation, using the music to occupy their conscious thinking mind, and using the language patterns that I've learned over the years, and with pure intention to get people to stop thinking, switching off their stress with breath work, getting them to stop thinking, getting them out of their heads, because if you're in this, then you can't get back into this, so we need to stop this, we need to get this to basically shut the fuck up, so we can reconnect back into the heart and back into the soul, where the divine essence is carried in this space here, in the upper energy centres, so to connect back to that, to reconnect back to that divine essence, that spiritual being that we carry inside us. The recordings that are there, and there's hundreds of hours of recordings within the program, so everything that I've done over the last probably 18 months has been recorded. All the different stuff that I do within the community, whether it's the guided stuff online, a lot of the stuff that we've done, the classes that we've done have all been recorded. So basically studio quality, into the mics with the music going in the background, again all done properly, and so that people can tap in and tune out of their reality and escape the matrix, escape the madness that they're living, escape the circus and the stress and the things that are basically bringing them down. That's why the spiritual side of this is so important. That's why the guidance through the meditations, so you can tap into them at any time. There's hundreds of recordings within the program, and it's what I see, and again with a session last Friday night within the community, and most of the stuff I'm doing just now is community members only. It's travelling so fast just now. In the beginning, there was loads and loads of different public classes, loads of free events, mostly all free events where I would go in, like sometimes up to a couple of hundred people, where you take them through breathwork, explain the breathing, explain what goes on, then take them through the experience of it, switch off their stress, like literally blow their brains out with breathing. A lot of power breathing in the beginning, which now what I know. This is before COVID, so maybe it was different then. Maybe, I don't know. But certainly, the challenge that people face now, if you to take somebody through the breathing I was doing in 2017 and 18, there's a real strong chance you could kill them in terms of what it does to the heart and what it does to the brain. So I was, I suppose, lucky. Or maybe I was protected or guided, I don't know, but nothing ever went wrong. But, when you take somebody through that experience, and you get them to that point of the knowing, of the goodness that they carry inside them. That happens when you switch off the stress. That happens when you're able to get somebody out their nut, and then to reconnect back into the heart, back into the soul. And what we experience and what I see all the time is it doesn't matter what it is. So from a child who's suffering from anxiety, all the way up to an elite professional athlete, or some corporate executive that's making squillions, and it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether it's the mental health challenges, whether it's the physical health challenges, whether you're suffering, whether you're down, whether you're broken, or you're beaten with depression or anxiety. That's easy to fix. And then all the way up to somebody who's absolutely flying, like the top of the top elite athletes who are trying to get to the next level, trying to those marginal gains, trying to just perfect and gain that extra 1 or 2%. Then this way of living and being, it helps and makes better every single thing that it touches. That's what we see. It doesn't matter where you are, or what you're coming in with, what you're carrying. What you're trying to, whether you're trying to heal something, whether you're trying to get beyond something, whether you're trying to heal, whether it's the physical or whether it's the mental or whether it's something that's stored within your body, something that's happened to you. What we find is with this work, there's something magic. As it happened to me with that really profound, the first time that enlightened experience, it fixed everything. So for me then, that's the bit that we need to try and get to. The intention is to get to that. The intention is to help people remember the divine that's inside them. That's what all this is about. And it's inside everybody. And that's why I am so sure when I'm doing this. That's why I'm so certain. Doesn't matter what comes through my gates. No idea. All focus is on the solutions. Doesn't matter what they're carrying. Doesn't matter their story. Many times in the beginning, I would ask somebody to text me their story. So they'd write me out their whole story. I would get a book sometimes. And I would scan through it, and you would obviously do the courtesy of reading it just to see where they were. But once I'd read it for the first time, when people come in to see me, fuck listening to that for the next hour. Because when you're telling that story, you're reigniting the vibration. When you're telling that story, you're reliving it. And every single cell in your body, the chemistry within your body is responding to the story you're telling yourself. So when you're reliving stuff that happened 30 years ago, I did it once. But then, it's one of the things I had to do was never tell my story ever again. And I've just told my story, I get that. But now I'm telling it as, an example as to the reason that I'm doing this. I'm not telling it as in poor me, and I'm certainly not living it every single day. That's long gone. I now see it as the best thing that ever happened to me, every single bit of it. And that took me a long time, let me tell you, to get beyond it and to realise that if without all of that, without the pain and the suffering and the contrast and all the dark times that I had and the challenges and being suicidal and the traumas that I experienced in so many different levels, then I wouldn't be qualified to be doing the things that I'm doing now. I wouldn't be able to help anybody because I'd never done it myself. You need to go through it so you can teach it. I absolutely believe that. So it helps anybody. That's the important thing. It doesn't matter what it is. It's for everybody. And it takes a bit of work. You don't get it for free. It's not for everybody. Now within the program, you can't even just come in and sign up for the program now. To get round about it, you really, you got to kind of either a one-on-one or at least a conversation so I can see who you are. Because over the last couple of years, bringing people in, there's a massive fall-off rate. And that's really because of the work that's required to get to the things that I'm talking about. I mean, I've been doing this every single day for the last 28 years, nearly 29 years now. So there's never a day off. Myra from the community says, choose your hard. You can either be in that state of pity and, poor fucking me and, depressed and down. Or you can get up and do your breathing and jump in the cold shower or jump in the tub or get into meditation. You can take back control and actually be proactive and change your state and change every single cell in your body as well as your consciousness by the work that's required and the work that you need to do to experience the benefits that I'm talking about. And what I've learned over the last couple of years is most people don't want to do that. They really don't. They love the idea of it. They hear me talking, especially if I'm in full flow and I'm really on it, and especially when they get the experience as well. If they lie down on the floor, and even more so, I suppose, in the group settings, when you're really into it, when I'm like in full flow and it's coming through me, not when I'm in full flow, when it's coming through me in full flow, and people get that experience in a group. The tears will maybe cry for the first time in their life. The trauma gets released, the pain and the suffering and whatever it is. When people get that, when you go through that experience, then, the reason for doing it and why is it important, what it does for people and how it makes things better, and where it gets you to, the place that it gets you to, why it's so important is because that's how it's meant to be. This is why it's so important. That's how we're supposed to live. That's how we're supposed to go through this life. Sorry, my wee computer just went a bit mental there. That's how, as a human being, as children of the divine, that's how, when we come in and incarnate into this life, for whatever reason it isn't that way, but that's the way that it's supposed to be. There's a natural way of living and being, and we are so far removed from that just now that it's scary. In fact, it's terrifying when you see the condition that people are in. So that's why we're doing this. That's why it's important to get on about it. It's not for everybody. It does take work. It is so simple, but it is no easy. And what we've found is, it's like, your reasons and your why. What's your reasons and what's your why? Why do you want to do it? That's why when I see somebody that's been through hell, like decimated, they've got fuck all, they've nothing, whether it's with addiction or whether it's with trauma or whether it's like, and they've tried everything. I've done everything. I've been to all the life coaches. I've been to Tony Robbins. And they still don't get it. And it's like, right, okay, so what I teach is self-reliance. To get it for yourself so you don't need anybody. And the most important part, in terms of, the meditation, the spiritual side, that when you're tapping in to the field of consciousness, when you actually understand what meditation is, the purpose of meditation is simple: to become God, to be still and know that I am God. Now, and that sounds mental, but obviously we are not the full thing. We are not gods, but we carry a piece of that divine inside of us. So when you go into meditation, the intention is to experience union with that, to be in alignment, to be in that flow state of alignment, to be in spirit, to be inspired. That's what meditation is. Meditation is not to relax or to quiet your mind. The amount of people I see teaching meditation lying down, and you're like, nah, that's because most people fall asleep. Especially you take them through some breath work, lying on their back, you put them straight to sleep. I see somebody with chronic stress, somebody that's really switched on, they're so fired up, can't sleep, like just can't switch it off. I'll always take them through breathing sitting up, because if 2 minutes in it, I've seen people go to sleep inside 2 breaths. The minute you take that second breath and you maybe squeeze a wee bit of stress into the brain, and you give them a wee bit of reset, bang, they can go to sleep, because it's the first time their nervous system has been switched off in their entire life. So the work that it takes, what's involved in it, is not for everybody. And that's why now you can't just sign up for the program. You can't just jump in and run about it and get access to the videos. We want to know who you are, because the community itself is so important to me, I can't tell you. The people that are on about this, the people that are up every single day and doing the work, the ones that are doing the breath work and living with intention. So whether it's breath work, cold exposure, doing the relaxation, doing the meditations, it takes a certain type of person, and the ones that are being attracted to it, the ones that are being called to get involved in about it, what we now have, after the last probably just over 18 months almost, the ones that are on about it, nobody seems to be leaving. The ones that are doing the work, the ones that really, really need it, the ones that they've tried everything, the ones that have, nothing else works, and the ones that if they don't do this, then life isn't going to work. Even just last week, a couple of people within the programme, just explaining where they're at in their life and how they get up during the night, 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and then they find their favourite recording. And there's all sorts of recordings, from up-regulation to down-regulation to sleep to switching yourself on to being in the flow. There's so many of them, literally hundreds of hours of it. So having that ability to tune in and use the tools and techniques to do what? To feel good. This is only about feeling good, which is your natural state, how it's meant to be. So when you understand the power of that, when you understand how the significance is simply feeling good, and not just feeling good, but feeling great, being happy, being joyful, being in that state, being inspired, being in spirit, to be in alignment. That's a great word. Alignment came through Abraham Hicks. As above, so below. In meditation, when it's pouring through you, when you become one with it, that's full alignment. And when you tap into it, you take on the power of it. So when you take on the power of it, there's nothing left undone. There's nothing that you can't work out. There's nothing that you can't fix, because you're taking on the power of the divine, and that power is inside every single one of us. And the reason for meditation is to connect back to it, to connect into it and take on the power of it, and that fixes almost every single thing that it touches. A wee bit of practice, a wee bit of kind of awareness as to what you're doing. There's nothing that can't be fixed. There's nothing that can't be fixed, so that's why I'm so protective of it. Those that want to get involved, it's a phone call, it's an email, it's a text. Watch this, and once you've seen this, you'll understand what the program is. Online community, we've got the app, we've got all the recordings, we've got the community itself, we've got the different sessions that we have together, and really kind of rising together is what it's all about, as one, in union as one. That's what I experience with enlightenment. That's why if you see my stuff online, it's as one is something I use all the time, because at a certain level of understanding, a certain level of consciousness, you get to experience that there is no separation. And the illusion of the separation in this world just now, no matter where it is, the flags, the countries, your belief systems, your religions, they keep us fighting, they keep us busy, they keep us occupied, they keep us in the low levels. And the thing about it, the ones that own this world, I do believe the ones that run this, they know all this shit. They know all this ancient wisdom and information and inspiration, but they just keep it to themselves. And they keep us, trapped in the zoo, trapped in stress and loss and disease and anguish and fighting, and the ego level of consciousness, keep us entertained, between the UFC and fucking Love Island and all the stuff that keeps us busy, the stuff that keeps us, having a point of view, the low level, the ego self, taking a perspective, this is what I think, this is the most, and it's like, that's a starter for 10 lower levels of consciousness, but eventually, I believe the purpose in this lifetime is to experience the divine, is to get it for yourself, and then hopefully, I don't know yet, but hopefully we don't need to come back, hopefully there's somebody else we can kick on to, or maybe you come back in a different way, but that's why, and that's what we're doing within the community, that's why I have so much, I'm so protective of the community. It's like one bad apple, one low vibration, somebody coming in, and you need to be very, very careful, especially just now, and especially those that have just woke up and the truthers, and they want to fix the world and talk about how wrong it is and how bad everything is, and who's doing what, and whether it's Trump or whether it's fucking Israel or whether it's fucking Stammer or whether it's the fucking holy wars or whatever it is that's going on. None of it matters. At a certain level, none of it matters. It's all distraction, and it's designed that way to keep you distracted for the real purpose of this life, which I believe is to experience the divinity that we carry inside us. That's what it should be. That's what should be getting taught. Even as a basic, even if you don't want to do that, just stick to the first part, the ability to switch off your nervous system, the ability to experience peace of mind, what it feels like to sleep properly. You don't need a lot of sleep, you need the right quality of sleep. The difference in your body to eat properly. This was almost called cleanse to heal. I'm day 4 of a cleanse just now. Just whole food. No processed food whatsoever. It's all whole food, and I can't tell you the levels of energy I'm experiencing after just 4 days. And this is something I'm going to keep going for the rest of the week. My sleep has changed. My mindset has absolutely changed. Last week I was experiencing a wee bit of anxiety. I don't know what's going on just now. There's a lot of people running about me just now who are experiencing, I never get anxiety, especially with the breath work and the cold exposure. I don't get anxiety. Maybe I had it way back in the day when I was in the hospitals and you'd be a wee bit overwhelmed, but this is coming out the blue and really feeling like a physical anxiety within my body. Last Thursday, Friday, almost like my chest was like this real kind of stress and pressure on my heart, my chest up in here, real overwhelming, And so at that point, last week, 4 or 5 people within the group have said to me, feeling really anxious this week. And at that point, again, where do you go for that? And then you look at the electromagnetic waves and you look at the fucking poisons in this world, and the mistake I made probably a couple of weeks ago was just to have a wee look and see what's going on in the world. I just started checking in to see how bad it was. And I know where it is, I can feel where it is. But the minute you're invested in it, the minute you get caught up in it, it's a slippery slope. And it was actually somebody said to me last week, that's probably brought on anxiety. The digital fucking ID and the digital passports was the thing, because I know where that goes. I know where they're trying to take us. You see through everything. When I come back from my first experience, you get to see through the veil. You get to see things in a completely different way. So when you hear things like digital ID to stop, the immigration coming in, you go, aye, all right, that's a great fucking Trojan horse. But what that means for us in terms of, and you just look at the world, look at China. And see what they're doing with, the whole, what's it they call it, social, basically your credits, so is it social credits? So depending on how good you are, as a human being, what you're, allows you to buy certain types of food and be in certain places, and so taking away your freedoms, basically depending on what they determine to be right or to be wrong. And at that point, even what you're talking about, like freedom of speech and how you express yourself, to think they could start to take stuff away from you because you're basically got a point of view that does not come into alignment with their point of view. And you look at their point of view in terms of who's winning from that. It isn't us, it isn't the 99%, it's the 1% that are basically controlling all of that, and you get to see these world leaders just now and the entire system that it's built on. America's in free fall, UK is no far behind, the entire Western world bankrupt, literally bankrupt, just they keep funding it and keep shoving money in. And then you look at the East and how the East is on the rise, so there's a massive change going on just now. The end of this civilization, the end of this, what do you call it, the empire, the American empire, America, the American dollar, and the land of the free and the land of opportunity, and how Britain have been fucking piggybacking that, or maybe, depends how high up you go, depending on who works for who, but that's in free fall just now, because it doesn't work, the whole debt-based usury system, the banks, the lending people money and then charging them interest for the rest of their life. I didn't know until recently that was banned. That's been banned at many different times in our recent history over the last hundreds of years, so it's like, that doesn't work, because the rich and the powerful get more rich and more powerful and get more and more assets, and us, the commoners, the kind of, the plebs, the working classes, then we're getting an absolute kicking just now. We really are, so it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I believe the way to fix it all is, the understanding of what's real, the understanding of the divine power that we carry inside of us, the understanding of what it means to be a human being, like a full human being. And most people don't know that. They spend their whole life in stress, trapped in their head, trapped in their ego, chasing stuff, chasing money, the deadly sins, whether it's addiction or sex or food or whatever it is. They spend their whole life in greed and trying to reach this illusionary place they think is going to make them happy. And you can't get there. I know you can't get. I know people with everything and they've got fuck all, they've got nothing. They've got absolutely nothing. Some of the most successful people I know, their partner normally doesn't like them or is not with them any longer, and their children don't know them because they're chasing this illusion. It's an illusion, that's what it is. So that whole thing is broken. It's done and dusted. It's just a matter of time before it finishes, and we need to rebuild it in a different way. And that's really what I'm doing here, is documenting a different way of doing it. And it's the natural way. It's the natural path of how it's meant to be, and it's one experience. That's. I've got it to a point now over the last couple of years. It doesn't matter what it is you're coming in with. Almost every. I'm not going to say every single time. There's been one or two over the thousands of people that I've taken through this experience. Especially if it's one-on-ones. Especially when you know specific what they're dealing with. But when you reconnect and remember, this is all about remembering, because it's inside of you. If you're stuck in your head all the time, you're lost in the mind and the ego and the intellect and all that never-ending noise. Once you stop that and you give yourself a break, and then you divert your attention and your awareness inside, and you reconnect back into how you're meant to feel, and you remember what things like joy feels like. When's the last time you felt joyful is a great question. When's the last time you were truly happy? When's the last time you felt love? The amount of people that have never ever felt love in this life because of whatever, the traumas and the stuff they've been through, or never been shown love, or never been able to express it. And as I discovered, that's why they say that God is love. That's the divine, that essence that we call love. That's how we experience God. It feels exactly like that. When I became it and it became me, it felt like love. So to remember that that's available to us, to remember there's a different way of living and being, that's how we fix this world. That's what it's all about. And that's what this community is all about. That's what the Vortex is all about. That's what I'm all about. Is to help humanity, those who are seeking. And it's not for everybody. It's I get that, and a lot of people are going to tune into this and go, he's fucking off, he's not, he's mental, he's talking about God, it's some religious cult. I've heard that a few times, it's a cult. And a cult is everybody comes in and it all gets diverted. So all the efforts get diverted towards the one, the leader. And when you get to know me and what this is, everybody comes in and they get it for themselves. So I'm actually projecting it away from me. I don't want it. I don't want to be the man. I work for the man, the divine, but the divine is inside all of us. So every single one of us is the man. We just need to understand what that means, and then the pathway the kind of stepping stones, which the program is, how to experience that. Anybody can get it, and it fixes every single thing that it touches, for children all the way up to, you know, elite athletes and high flyers and people that are absolutely doing amazing and want to do a wee bit better. Everything gets better, you know, so that's why it's so significant, that's why it's so important. So, anybody that wants to get on about it, in terms of public classes, the Yoga Barn in Glasgow is the only real thing I've got going on just now. That's every month. Next one's the 24th of October. That's a great session, the reconnection. That's what this is. The first class is a reconnection back to the self, the remembering of how you're meant to feel, how you're supposed to feel, what it feels like to feel good, what it feels like to be in your natural state of having peace of mind. And then, you know, by intention, we then remind you how you're able to feel. Happiness, like feeling joy, like feeling love, feeling the goodness that you carry inside you. That's how we fix this world. And the programme is the vehicle that I've got to help those. So if you don't want to get on about me, you don't want to, you can't, you know, get to Lanark or come and see me in person. It's all online, you know. But to get onto the programme, to be in the community, as I said, you know, it's a sacred space, and I protect it with my life, you know. So before you even do that, you need to basically speak to me, see what we're all about, see what you're all about, whether it's a phone call or, you know, an email, whatever it is, and then we can take it from there, you know. So that's where we're at. That's what the Vortex is. That's what I'm all about. That's why I'm doing this. That's my reasons. That's my why. The intention is to take the world from the darkness that it's in to the light of the divine. That's what's available to all of us, you know, and hopefully in that process, you know, end the madness, this free fall the world is in just now. I believe it's not too late. I believe that hour is also very, very late, but there's still time to fix it, you know, and it's not going to take everybody. It's like power versus force, power over force. The power of the divine is inexhaustible. The force that they use, the sneakery, like the debt-based system, you know, the banks and the fucking, you know, the illusions and the trickery to keep you suppressed with the foods that they eat and the fucking medications and all that kind of stuff. That's had its day. Too many people are sick. And because of the internet, even though I believe that was set up with impure intentions, but because the ability to communicate with each other, there's so many people just now that are so awake, especially after COVID, you know, especially with the amount of people that lost their life and experienced like real health difficulties and are still living with them every single day, whether it was through the virus itself or, you know, through the fucking poisons, then, you know, there's a time of great awakening. But to wake up isn't enough. You know, we need to know how to then carry it forward, and that's what this is. You know, it's the path, the natural path back to God, back to the divine, understanding what that actually means, understanding what God is, you know, and realising that you carry it inside you, and then learning to breathe, to switch off your nervous system, and learning to sleep properly, and then learning a wee bit of awareness as to how you're supposed to eat, what the body actually needs, not what you want, but what you actually need to rebuild your body. And then once we get to the spiritual stuff, you know, things like meditation, once you start to experience union with the divine, once you start to go inside and your heart really opens up, there are so many people just now, their hearts are opening up, but once you really open up, the whole world changes, and that is how we fix this world. People going into their work in the morning time from our community, we love in their heart, not going about with sandwich boards and fucking trying to ram it down people's throat, but just to get it for themselves. That's the only thing you're meant to do, is to get it for yourself, the true self, the higher self. Get it for yourself in this lifetime. But you conduct yourself in a different way. I was in the supermarket today and I was in such a good mood, and one of the manageresses in it comes to yoga with Jill on a Tuesday night. And I've actually taken them through breathwork as well, taking her through breathwork, and it was a big hug, you know. That was at 9:30 this morning. I could just see a couple of people going, "What the fuck is that?" And I was sending her love, and she was sending me love. She was beaming, absolutely beaming, you know, just absolutely great. And that's how we fix the world. It's one soul at a time every single day. And what you'll find is when you're in a good mood and you're happy and you're joyful and you've got this way of living, once you really get it for yourself, the desire to help other people is what it's all about, you know, having compassion and empathy, and then the ability to step in and help somebody. But the only way you get to do that is if you've got it for yourself first. So that's why the only job is to get it for you, and then once you've got that, then we go and fix the world. So, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Number 65. What is this? What is this all about? I hope that made sense. I hope after I finish, I'll only go back through it and think what I've missed and what I haven't. I feel as if I've covered everything. Any questions, you can hit me up and I'll be happy to answer anything. God bless. Take it easy. Peace out. And bye for now.